Oh, before that, let me see if one of your interns is willing to say something about her experience. Maybe
They are
Adriana?
here. Kelsey and Adriana and Mark.
Yeah. Are you there? Maybe Adriana? Let's see if can we allow her to talk? Oh, you did, Adriana? Maybe she's not hearing us. Or Kelsey? I'm not seeing Kelsey. Okay, well, next time. But again, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for the wonderful presentation and for all the work you're doing.
Take care.
All right, so we're going to continue our next panel. It's going to be conducted by Alison Carter. And supposed to start a little bit later at 2:10. But Alison, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hi.
Okay, perfect.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Hi, folks. Good afternoon. I think we've got all of our panelists on right now, which is wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and I'll start sharing my screen in just a second while we get ourselves ready for our discussion. Okay, is that coming through all right? Yes, okay. Excellent, so hi again, my name is Alison Carter. I'm a student with the UMass Boston Spanish-English Translation Certificate Program, and I'm joined this afternoon by three of my classmates, Marcia Webster, Ines Fusco, and Francisco Javier Buesa Ucles, to discuss new developments in translation. So to get us started, I'm going to ask each of my co-panelists to unmute and briefly introduce themselves. So if Marcia could get us started.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Marcia Webster, and I'm originally from the beautiful island of Jamaica. However, I live and work. Now I teach Spanish in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I've had the opportunity to live in various countries, including Venezuela, Cayman Islands. I'm now in the United States. And I've taught, my career is really teaching ESL and Spanish at both the secondary and tertiary levels. And I'm also looking forward to embarking on, in the near future, a new profession in translating as well. So thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you. And next, Ines.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ines Fusco, and I was born in the Dominican Republic, and my family migrated here to the States, and I've been in Massachusetts for a great many years. I am fluent in Spanish language and culture. I have been an interpreter for the last 5 years, and I started my translation career, was kind of thrown into it at a previous job when I was the marketing communications project manager and developing education programs in English and Spanish for staff and patients. I have experience in, I spoke earlier about my experience in interpreting legal, judicial, medical, and everything else that falls under classified. And I am also a student at UMass taking the certificate course in translation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Francisco.
Good afternoon. Saludos desde Honduras. My name is Francisco. I'm a national of Honduras, and my area of expertise is food science. I have spent over 15 years first teaching in academia related to food science, and then in the food industry the last 5 years. Now I'm working for USDA here in Honduras and also teaching quality systems. So I started to delve in this world of translation about 5-6 years while I was in the food industry. mostly because of my work related to regulatory and quality for global markets. So I had to translate a lot of documents, and it has grown into me, and I decided to make it also a career. So here I am. I took the certification program with Dr. Mancia, and we're about to be done. So my presentation today will be related to that, to the use of new technologies in translation for the food industry. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. So we'll have time after the presentation. We actually have a couple more minutes, I think, to work with for questions. And so I'd ask if folks can use the Q&A box to ask questions, and we'll be able to address them either as we go or at the end of each of the presentations. Let me just get started on this. I will actually start us by taking a little bit of backwards. I am going to be discussing briefly the history and evolution of the Spanish language. I know that we have many languages represented on today's call. My hope is to kind of provide a lens to explore language as a whole, as a linguistic tapestry, and how languages incorporate new words, using Spanish as our example here. So Spanish is the second most spoken language in the world, with 450 million native speakers and almost 75 million second language speakers. It is an official language in 20 countries. And though it originated on the Iberian Peninsula, Spain today is home to less than 10% of the world's Spanish speakers. A number of cultural and historical events have contributed to Spanish's evolution, including occupations of the Iberian Peninsula, contact with neighboring peoples, the Spanish Empire's colonization of the Americas, and finally, cultural and technological revolutions of recent centuries. We can see linguistic footprints from these sources in Spanish's syntax and lexicon. I'll go through a few languages in each of the categories, focusing mainly on etymology and vocabulary. There are some languages that we won't have time to cover that I wanted to briefly note here, including neighbors, Basque and Celtic, also neighbors, Portuguese and Catalan, which are both the source of many maritime words in Spanish. For written word, Italian, which brought artistic words during the Renaissance, and French, which had a vocabulary surge mostly during the 18th century. So, as a Romance language, Spanish is rooted primarily in Vulgar Latin, the basis for about 75% of the language. Latin is the primary foundation for what are called closed class words, which add new members much less easily, which includes prepositions, pronouns, and other function words. Romans were present on the Iberian Peninsula for over 600 years, starting in the 3rd century BCE. And it's estimated that Spanish became a distinct language from Vulgar Latin by the 8th century, and was recognized as an official language in the 13th century. Following the Romans, the Germanic Visigoths invaded the Iberian Peninsula in the 5th century. There are some key Germanisms that entered Spanish during this time, including ropa, clothes, ganar, to win, two common Spanish words. However, most Spanish words of German origin actually originate from periods that bookend this invasion. In the 4th and 5th centuries, this includes contact between the Romans and Germanic tribes. And in the 12th and 13th century, Frankish words mainly entered Spanish by way of Old French. The Moors defeated the Visigoths in 711 and occupied the Iberian Peninsula for over 5 centuries until 1492. As much as 8% of modern Spanish stems from Arabic. This exact figure is disputed. Some put it at about 4%, some at about 8%, but it is the second largest influence following Latin. Arabic had a notable impact on vocabulary, mainly nouns, some verbs and adjectives, in the realms of military, food, government, commerce, and cities, as well as many place names throughout Spain. In addition to some previous slides, especially Latin and Arabic, this is a slide that could well be its own independent presentation. But in addition to the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula, 1492 also marked the Spanish Empire's expansion into the Americas. Many Spanish terms stemming from indigenous languages are nouns related to food, plants, and animals. Taíno is a Caribbean area, or a language from Caribbean, Quechua, Tupi-Guarani from South America, Nahuatl from Central America areas. This vocabulary can be more common in certain regional varieties of Spanish in the Americas. And there are some examples of grammar and syntax impact. For instance, Quechua has had an influence on Andean Spanish in terms of word order, number agreement, and verb conjugation. Greek's impact on Spanish is largely indirect, almost always by way of an intermediary language, usually Latin, and more commonly other European languages, or more recently other European languages. These words are mainly concentrated in three fields. The first is daily life through Latin, stemming from several centuries of close contact between Greeks and Romans. The second is Christianity, and the third is scientific terminology, which also includes most subject matter names ending in ismo and logia, which are ism and ology in English. And finally, English. In the second half of the 19th century, a handful of English terms entered Spanish by way of Britain, including club, and revolver. In the 20th and 21st century, technological, scientific, and economic innovations have brought a number of English terms, as well as words related to culture and sports. Another category of English borrowings is noun-noun compounds, which are found much more typically in Germanic languages than Romance languages. One example of this is año luz for light year. Many English terms have entered Spanish so recently that they've not had sufficient time to adapt to the norms of the language, and so are considered somewhat unintegrated borrowings. As with new terms and borrowings that have come before them, their fuller role in Spanish's linguistic and etymological tapestry remains to be seen. And with that, we have Marcia Webster up next. Marcia, I think you might be muted there.
Could you just make it like full screen? Is it possible? Allison?
I'm not sure if I can
No?
make it larger here, but I might be able to zoom in on certain areas if you'd like me to.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, if there's a point, if there's anything you want me to zoom in on.
You can just follow what I'm saying, because I'm just going to go section by section, so you'll be able to follow me, I think. All right. Okay. Hello again, everyone. I'm Marcia Webster, and my topic for today is translating together the way forward. In my study, I wanted to investigate the steps that were being taken to create open source machine translation tools that have the potential to facilitate the dissemination of materials to underserved communities. The paper that I did discusses two studies, an iterative process designed by researchers at the University of Maryland, as well as a new open source translation software developed by Italian and British researchers. Essentially, I analyzed the impact of the two computer-based translation systems on the collaborative process in translation, and I examined the programs in relation to their accessibility, ease of use, and impact on providing quality translations within the framework of limited professional input. And my findings, based off the slides, posited that modern technology has given us the tools to translate all types of content accurately. The methodology gives you the the outline of the two studies. Now, the first study, figures 1 and 2, relates to study 1. And that study proposed creating an iterative protocol that improved the synergy between translation technology and human computer-based interaction. Essentially, the framework involved mainly monolingual participants collaborating to make sense of machine translation. This can be done in numerous language pairs. So for example, it would be useful for, with lesser known languages as well. For the second study, or sub-study 2, it assessed MMT, which is Modern Machine Translation. It's a new open source machine translation software. And the paper described the general architecture of the software and compared MMT against other contemporary commercial and research Now, after analyzing both studies, the results for, could you, Alisa, could you just go up a little bit with the, so that I can, yes, the results, so you can, the results section.
Sure, I can, does that make the results larger for you?
Perfect, and just move it up a little bit. Thank you, appreciate it. So therefore, for figure 1, it demonstrated an example of a French sentence first translated using the machine translation software, and then a monolingual English speaker making her best guess as to what the sentence was really trying to say. The sentence was then back translated to French, and the French speaker corrected the version, and the process, of course, was repeated. Now, those were the edits that were done in the actual document, the actual machine translation document. The second figure illustrated how the translation process takes place. It illustrated the two monolingual participants on both ends. The French speaker, of course, commences with a sentence that needs to be translated. And this is sent to the automated translation platform that generates an English sentence. The English speaker edits and produces something that is more or less grammatically correct, which is also back translated to generate a French sentence. And this process is repeated until an acceptable translation is produced. And what is important is that both sentences, the persons involved can have limited knowledge of the other person's language. All right. Okay, Alison, could you just move over to the discussion a little bit? Thank you. Thank you. So.
Sorry about that. I will.
No problem, no problem.
Head us back here. All right, let me get us back to the discussion. Oh. There we go.
Okay. Now I'm just gonna go again. So the second study, of course, looked mainly at this translation platform called Modern Machine Translation, and it compared it to two common translation platforms, Moses and Google Web's translation, which is Google Translate. And the table there illustrates, it shows that it examined the translation quality, the overall cost of the platforms, and the standard time to translate a sentence, one sentence by itself. MMT performed better than both Moses and Google Translate in output in the out-of-domain conditions, thanks to its special adaptability feature to better adapt to language input and produce higher quality translations. So essentially, over the last 2 decades, computational research on translation has undergone a revolution. Machine translation systems that previously relied on human input, for grammar and meaning, have now been largely substituted by systems that acquire statistical models from vast amount of translated text. Now, the desire to develop and disseminate machine translation platforms that are accessible to translators and interested in providing translated materials for underserved communities is growing. The discussed studies that I reviewed clearly underscore that researchers are actively working to create high quality systems that are not only easy to use, but also produce consistently accurate translation. And to close, the opportunity for individuals to collaborate in order to generate low cost and accurate and relevant material using translation platforms is increasing. This can only be beneficial for understanding and informational materials at quickly and also cost effectively. With that, I thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Marcia. Let me just get this. Okay, let me make this a little bit larger for you, Inez. Okay, and Inez, once again, if you need me to zoom in on any areas, just let me know. Oh, I think you might be muted, actually.
Perfect.
There you go.
That helps. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this part of the presentation. My study was, what is a CAT tool? Is it going to meow at me? A decision-making guide for translators. Let's see. First, I think establishing what tool is right for you can be as easy as you want it to be. Translators should begin by examining your translation level, your text type specialties, and your personal goals over the next 1 to 3 years, 10 years, because what you use as a tool is very subjective, and it's really going to depend on what you like and your technological needs. Computer-aided translation tools, and I emphasize aided, are designed to assist the translator in delivering their best work. They help you to create, edit, manage, and store your content. Some TMs include compatibility with a variety of formats like PDF, Adobe InDesign, and Word, giving you, the translator, the capability to receive and deliver professional looking graphic files to your client without the need for purchasing additional software. And this is important because it relates to the cost. CAT tools can also offer more robust solutions to help you easily manage and QA your content, manage your projects, and manage your business. But it's important to know and to understand that translation memory does not mean that it's going to translate your document for you. Translation is done by a human translator. With some SDL user experience, I set out to prove if SDL is really the best choice among a list of translation memory and machine translation providers. Information like cost, free options, ease of use, and translators' goals were things that I considered and discussed. A view of the translation industry and the market helped to guide the decision-making process in establishing computer and software needs as well. Before taking a look at the goals, one should consider, what is the initial investment in a CAT tool? What are most people using as a CAT tool? And is there something that's compatible, that's free? Do you have the necessary equipment, or will you invest in a new computer? And which software options would suit your needs and subscriptions? Some of the additional capabilities that are offered to you in the TM, it memorizes, saves, and translates your files. You also get term-based development, which help you to build client-specific glossaries and expand your personal dictionaries of words and phrases. And as for machine translation, this is the use of computer technology to translate content without a human. For the purpose of this research, we will look at MT as a means of developing business in terms of MT post-editing space. Many of the same tools that provide TM now provide MT capabilities. But again, one should never confuse the two. my results. While SDL has long time set the standard for others to follow, many CLAP tools on the market provide similar and sometimes better performance like Deja Vu, MemoQ, and CafeTran. These developers are giving translators a great variety of applications to choose from. In the past couple of years, though, we've noticed a shift in pricing for the SDL product. Since the start of this research paper, the SDL pricing has ranged from over $800 to $440. If you follow them at all, you know that their prices vary a lot throughout the year. To meet the needs of the translators, I think they're listening to us. SDL has now made available and offers a subscription price, an annual subscription of $129. Previously, they had offered this at $9.99 a month, but now they've changed their model and they're capturing you for the year rather than for the month. You can see here also in looking at the different tools, we took a look at pricing. And as part of pricing, SDL Trados will range up there from $129, and at the point that I was doing this research, up to $759, but I've seen their price go up as high as $1,200. And in previous years, it was priced at $1,500 and above, and really was that type of tool that people love, but it became somewhat cost prohibitive, allowing other players to come into the market. But again, with all this said, you can still see here on the diagram, the highest peak there on the graph is the SDL product. That was a study done in 2013, asking translators which products they use the most. And the SDL Trados product was #1 in 2013, and it still is today. So while SDL has set the standard for others to follow, many CAT tools on the market provide similar and sometimes better performance. These developers, again, like I said, are giving translators a variety of applications. Over the past few years, the quality of machine translation has been increasing, while the amount of required post-editing has been decreasing. And you can see here where MemoSource shows us in a diagram from MemoSource, showing us the increase in the quality of machine translation, 50 plus quality, 75 plus quality in 2019 versus 50 plus quality in 2017. Over the past few years, while the amount of required post-editing has been decreasing, neuromachine translation empowers machines to receive training materials and learn from the data so that the machine can make decisions and produce a translation. With the MT market valued at $130 million to $400 million per the NIMSY 2019 report, and estimated growth expected to exceed $1.5 billion in 2024, it is no surprise that technology giants like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Apple have entered the MT space. Language service providers like Lionbridge, who's the #2 provider in the world, consider that machine translation is one of the most powerful tools in producing high-quality translations in more efficient manner. Through deep learning, neuromachine translation has greatly improved translation output. So in the discussion, it's not difficult to get started and do a straight translation with a CAT tool. As a new translator, I wanted to know, so what are the professionals using? And again, everything pointed to SDL. Most translators prefer SDL. They feel empowered by the use of SDL, of the SDL product, and they feel confident that the tool helps them to deliver quality translations while providing features to improve quality assurance, productivity, and efficiency. While the SDL product is known for high prices, recently it appears that, again, they have listened to translators and are offering simple cloud-based solutions, subscriptions for freelance translators, and a variety of different prices. If you follow them at all, you will see that their price varies a lot throughout the year. Secondly, computer-generated translations, or MT, have been producing better and better output over the last decade. Computer science has moved the translation service business in a direction that scares many translators. AI, machine learning, and MNT are changing the playing field, but this will not prohibit LSPs from hiring translators. LSP giant Lionbridge is pushing digitization and automation to help meet the global localization demand. As others like MemoSource are finding new ways to generate business by educating their clients on how to implement MT post-editing within their organizations. In conclusion, today, it's nearly impossible for a professional translator to build a growing business without the use of technology. In addition to language skills, agencies look for people who are savvy with CAT tools and other technology. SDL is the big CAT leader. While some translators complain about their pricing and SDL products sometimes being too high and sometimes being too complex, the fact still remains that SDL have been the leader and the preferred CAT tool provider for many years. So review your goals. Ask yourself some basic questions to help you establish your needs. Will you translate part-time or full-time? What is your translation type specialty? This could also play a role in what decision you make. Do you expect to work with an agency, direct clients, or a mix? Because that could direct what type of software you buy for yourself. How much money do you want to spend on a CAT tool, if any? If you've noted from my list, there are three CAT tools that I've noticed. They're noted: SmartCat, WordFast Anywhere, and I'm sorry, I can't read that far. And MidCat, yeah. And then the other thing that you want to consider is, do you need to upgrade your computer? Thank you. This concludes my my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Inez.
You're welcome.
Francisco, I'll get you set up with your slide in a full screen.
All right.
Just one second.
right.
And again, I just wanted to confirm, Diego, I think we have until 2:50 for when the next.
That's right.
Okay,
So you can
excellent.
go ahead. Thank you.
So again, either Francisco or we had a request in the chat for zooming in on parts. So if there's any request for an area to zoom in on, please just let me know.
All right, let's just start with the methods and I'll do the introduction. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm going to present this small exploratory study that I devised. It was related to a question that I had when I worked with the food industry, and because in that experience that I had, basically, I as an SME, as a technical expert in the industry, basically we tercerize. We sent all the translations to providers, to global providers, but we didn't know who did all those translations, and those translations were outbound and inbound. They were documents that we were acquiring for our knowledge, and there were also documents that like labels and packaging materials, everything that was going outside to the public at the global scale. So my question basically was, how many, are there any global service providers in translation that are dedicated to the food industry? Do they have a specialty on that, or is this just general? And the second question was basically what kind of modern tools are they using to speed up the process? Because as the industry has become more global, the delivery time has shortened basically. So the question was, how do they use CAT tools? Do they use computer-assisted and machine translation tools? And do they provide those services to the food industry at a global scale? Are there any global providers for the global food industry? So that's kind of where it came from. So with that, I set up a small project, a small study. Basically, I performed a research and looked for typical global, research that Google, a Google performance search. And basically I introduced the search that says, look for translation service providers for the food industry, and I got 93,000 hits. Okay, so I did a more advanced search for the ones that had basically that had updated their websites in the last month, right? And the ones that had provided those information in English. So I obtained a sample of 10 global translation providers or TSPs, and I evaluated them with for location coverage, where they headquarter, how many hubs have around the world, what locations. Also, how many of the top 100 food industries they have as clients. Then I evaluated their language coverage. How many languages do they feature as the services? How many language pairs? And also I evaluated and tried to see if what kind of quality assurance certifications they have, and most importantly, what kind of tools are they using? Are they using CAT tools? Are they using machine translation with post editing, or are they using both, or nothing, right? And the last thing that I evaluated was food industry expertise. In terms of technical translation, what were the areas that they excel or they focus in terms of their expertise? Were they more focused on translation of business materials or technical translations, or labeling, or whatever? Okay, so you can see 4 tables there. The first table refers to global coverage in terms of geographic.
Francisco, I
You
think
can see that most of these TSPs.
we might have lost you for 1 second. Would you mind repeating what you just said about that table?
Okay, so in the first table, what you can see is global coverage related to geography. So from the top 10 TSPs, you can see that most of them are located in Europe, more specifically in the UK. Okay? And some as steps and Alfred will have only hubs in 10 more countries. And the first 3 feature at 3 of the in the world. For example, features like Fliership, PepsiCo, Moto, which are some of the biggest companies in the world. It's the same for, you can see that most companies do not repeat.
I guess I'm going to stop
So
Francisco's video, just to see if that helps.
Sure. Yeah, Francisco, we're having some audio issues. It sounds like Diego's going to try pausing your video to see if that fixes it. Okay.
Hello?
Hi, can we try again and
Can you
see
hear
how the sound is working?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, that's a lot better.
Okay, I think it was the headphones. Okay,
Sure, and if we need to turn off video at any point, we can try that.
Okay, so on table 2, you basically can see the language coverage of translation service providers. You can see their coverage in terms of language regions is pretty much global. 80% of them claim to have global coverage of languages, and most of them coverage the biggest markets, which are Europe, Latin America, North America, and the Middle East and Asia, and Asia Pacific, right? In terms of, to cover that, they have at least 1,000 translators feature, or they claim to have at least 1,000 translators, but the average is about 3,600 translators per company, okay? And most of them, I think over 50% of those TSPs show that they can translate in above 100 languages and above 150 language pairs, okay? most of them are mostly English to another language. So in terms of what tools they are using and what kind of quality assurance methods they certification they use, you can see that most of these TSPs use CAD tools. And only one, and this is in line with what Ines mentioned previously, that MTPE is kind of on the way out, and CAD tools is kind of the prevalent technology used for translators and these service providers, okay? So only one, I think the translation people mentioned that MTPE was their primary method for translation, okay? And in terms of quality assurance, about half of those TSPs claim that they have certification in the specific standard for quality in translation, which is ISO 17100, okay? The other ones basically either feature security related standards or general quality management standards such as ISO 9001, okay? And as for the content or the type of technical translation services that they provide, most of them cover the basic areas of need of these food industries, meaning technical documents, business and package levels translations were offered by all of those providers. Legal and regulatory and website translations were provided by 90% of those providers, and then menu translations, 80% of those TSPs also feature that service. In terms of the future, STEPS is already offering real-time mobile translation via app, but that's with limited text length, okay? And there's already a couple of mobile apps that actually can perform label translations, okay, on food products, and that's for the general consumer. So the consumer goes with the cell phone and points their camera at the food label, and this called food code breaker basically can take a snapshot via OCR and can deliver the text or the audio of the translation into your phone, okay? So these are the very first steps, and actually this food code breaker can actually decode the additive. The additives have a general code, right? And they can decode that and interpret it and translate it into a certain language. So you can choose the language pair, and it's really good, but it's still not there, okay? It's not perfect, but that's kind of where it's going, okay? So as for the conclusions, we can see that yes, there's widespread use of CAD and MT among TSP users, and that suggests that food companies are trusting these companies that use these tools for their demands of speed, of delivery, and accuracy, okay? And in terms of recommendations, more translation studies, and this is what I found. I found limited research related to application of new translation strategies and tools like hybrid corpus, intersemiotic translation, and other emerging approaches. It was very limited. There were just a couple of articles that I found on that. So more research is related to that in order to keep up with these technical developments that are coming, okay? And that's what I had for you. I thank you for your attention, and I'll be open to questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Francisco. I'm gonna just go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that we can see the panelists. It looks like we have about 4 minutes left, and a number of the questions we had, I know that our panelists have been answering within the Q&A box, but I wrote down a couple that came up, and we can see if any others pop up. But one I just saw, Pilar, you had mentioned, where was it? Pilar had said tapioca. Yes, tapioca does also come from Tupi, just like mandioca. That was in the chat box. And then Inez, we'd had a question from Sladiana in the chat box. How much time do you need to learn how to use SDL?
So I personally have had SDL Trados for a while and haven't dove into all the pieces and the parts. It's really very easy to get on, like I said, and just start doing a translation. It's very similar. It puts it in a 2-column segment for you, and it starts remembering everything that you're typing. You can do a manual translation, or you can have it do machine translation and download it on looking just like the beautiful file your client sent you. And that takes no time at all.
Excellent, thank you. And we have a question in the Q&A box from Pilar. Does anyone know if SDL or any software have capabilities for transcription/translation, i.e. formatting and functions applicable to do transcriptions or translations of interviews?
I can say that when you use the SDL Trados and the other tools that provide you the capabilities of WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, giving you a file that looks very much like the one you gave it. You can feel comfortable in that. If you give a CAT tool a file for translation and you do your own translation side by side, it should, if it's a good CAT tool, it should give it back to you looking exactly like the file that you started with.
Okay.
And there are free tools that do that as well.
Okay, excellent. I think that those are the questions we've got in the Q&A box. And I know we're just about at time. We have our next panel starting in 2 minutes. So if we have another question that comes up, we can answer it in the next minute or so. But if not, I can pass it off to you, Diego, to get started on our next panel.
Thank you so much.